Well, as part of my research for this week's sermon, I did a little search of movies that have a plot related to dinner parties. And it confirmed my suspicions. Movies with the theme of dinner parties rarely, if ever, have fairy tale endings. In fact, most are horror movies or dark comedies. It's funny to me how writers view this type of gathering as the perfect setup for complete awkwardness or some scandal. And in many cases in movies, the setup for something is even worse. But that's all just cinema. That's just people telling stories, exaggerating things to sell movie tickets because people like to be scared, or at least like to see that there are lots of people who have drama and awkwardness in their families or social groups. That's all it is. But funny thing, Jesus was involved in a number of dinner parties. He received and accepted a number of dinner invitations that the gospel writers tell us about. And most of the time, they ended in total drama, most often caused by Jesus. In fact, the more I was thinking about this, the more I realized that Jesus was the guest that you wanted at your table if you really enjoyed drama with dinner. His reputation was known. People had to understand that this dinner guest wasn't about to follow or to care at all about which fork is used for what. I can picture people sending out the invitation and themselves, maybe even making friendly wagers with others about who he was going to call out first. This will be fun, perhaps they were thinking. Let's get just the right people on the guest list to cause the drama and see how everyone reacts. Now remember, in the stories we have about Jesus at dinner parties, we hear about a woman with a scandalous background caressing his feet. We hear him eating with unclean hands as he shares the table with lots of people who were considered unclean. People break into things to beg for healing, and he often, drank more than people considered to be respectable, especially those who were trying to get him. And so it's also interesting to see that the company he is keeping in our passage today. He's been invited to eat a Sabbath meal with the Pharisees, and as we heard, they were watching him closely. I wonder about that little comment. They were watching him closely. We often think of that watching in terms of playing gotcha, that they were trying to catch him doing something so that they could prove that he wasn't so great, and they could end this ridiculous show that he was putting on and go back to the way things were before people started listening to, and worse, following this crazy itinerant preacher. But maybe there's more. Because maybe some of the Pharisees were watching him because they knew that there was something to what he was saying. This is a group that had been holding on to tradition for so long, believing that it was a way to keep God at the center. Those rituals were meaningful. Those laws were essential to holding God in honor. But we also know that there were some who believed in Jesus. Don't forget, we have the story of Nicodemus, who came tiptoeing under the cover of night to see him. And Joseph of Arimathea, who was his disciple. And even Acts records those of the party of the Pharisees who believed. And so perhaps they were at least somewhat interested in understanding what Jesus was preaching. Yes, they were watching. But notice Jesus, because that's just what he does. He notices everything that is going on. More than looking to copy the actions of others for etiquette reasons, he is studying, paying attention, critiquing even what others are doing. Picture it. These leaders all arrive looking for their spot, their place card, ready to switch it with someone else, vying for attention and importance, shoving others out of the way to get the best spot for the photo, finding the seat next to the most important person, at least in their minds, so they can seem more powerful and dignified. Maybe they were networking, but seeking the transaction that might come with buddying up to the most important person at the table. And Jesus just sits back and watches this ridiculous display, this parade of people thinking that they are so important. And then he tells that story that makes things really awkward. When you're invited to dinner, don't insist on playing musical chairs for a place of honor, he says. Seek out the place that no one wants. Sit there. And while you're doing that, notice how it feels to sit in that lowly place, a place without any status. Notice how it feels to imagine that the bowl of mashed potatoes might be empty when it gets to you, or the dessert might just be crumbs. Lean into the discomfort of the chair, the cheap seats. Sacrifice what you have, the status that you think you have, because once you really understand what it is to live the life of someone else, you might just be invited to have more power and influence, and you can take all of that you've learned with you. And if that isn't provocative and countercultural enough, he goes on like the scandalous, awkward dinner guest that he is, saying, hey, throw a party and invite every person you know that can't invite you back. Put aside the invitations that are only for climbing the social ladder and invite the unclean who never get invited. Invite the people for whom you'll have to make adjustments to your table and even home. Invite the people who will need assistance. Give something to others without expecting one thing, even acknowledgement. That's when you will be blessed. Now, I read someone point out that we don't hear the reactions of those at the party. In some ways, that is brilliant because it allows us to imagine our own feelings, our own reactions to this scandalous statement from Jesus. Did they feel shamed? Do we feel shamed when we hear this? Did they argue back with a lot of, yeah, but Jesus, oh, come on, really, come on, but this, but that? Do we want to do that when we read this passage? Do we want to answer back that, hey, this instruction is just simply not for us? This many, 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 many centuries ago. This is for them, not us. But friends, I'm afraid it is for us. Jesus insists that it is for us. Because this is who God is. Our God, the one who comes to invite us to look at our priorities and then reverse them. Because there is really no end to the game of who is in and who is out. We have been playing that game for centuries, and we will continue to do that. But the truth is, God's kingdom is not a place of scarcity. It's not a place of not having enough. It is a place of abundance where all are already welcome, all are loved and cherished. The currency there is of humility, not arrogance, of generosity, not stinginess, of hospitality, not of fear. But it's not that easy. We are in a culture where we value what we whatever we see as the best, and we trick ourselves into thinking that we can be or have whatever that is. And we often give the most attention to those things that we think are the best. And this is nothing new. Pastor and Professor Michael Ruffin talks about our passage from Jeremiah today. Jeremiah probably delivered that message in our text near the turn of the 6th century, he reminds us, when Egypt and Assyria were still the relevant powers, and Babylon was beginning its ascendancy. But the book of Jeremiah was still being formed during the Babylonian exile, so Jeremiah's original audience would have heard the passage in a situation where judgment was looming, but maybe it was still avoidable. While the book's original audience would have heard the passage after judgment had come and restoration was hoped for. So for the people listening to Jeremiah deliver these words, Jerusalem is a source of misplaced confidence. While for those reading and hearing the book during the exile, a destroyed city is a source of memory and of hope. Initially, the relationship between God and the people was good, but something has happened. The people got restless. They began creating a hierarchy in society, one that left God out. And given all that the Lord has done in bringing the ancestors through the wilderness and establishing this relationship with Him, it's shocking that they would go away. Shocking that they pursued other gods, even though those supposed gods were in fact nothing. The NRSV says that ancestors went after worthless things and became worthless themselves. The Hebrew word worthless is havel, which is the basic meaning is vapor, in which which can mean things as emptiness. In pursuing gods who are nothing, the ancestors became nothing themselves. Pursuit of insubstantial gods produces insubstantial people. But that was what was beginning to happen. As the people looked around and became jealous and restless, they began othering people. And what happened? The poor only got poorer, and the weak only got weaker. Those in debt only plummeted into greater debt, all because the people turned away from God and wanted what others had, wanted a better seat at the table. But God didn't bring them through the wilderness so that they could destroy each other. And friends, that is true for us today, right here and right now. This all makes me wonder who and what we invite to our dinner parties and who and what we seat in places of honor. Is it humility? Is it grace and love that we invite to put in places of honor? Or is it pride and greed and distrust that we invite ourselves and others to consume? The truth is, Jesus breaks in and sits down and calls us out, and also calls us to better, more loving community. You know, all we have to do is watch and notice what Jesus does. Paying attention to those in need, paying attention to those who are turning their backs. And then when we do that, we have to trust that Jesus will not just join us for the beginning, not just for appetizers, but through the entire meal until we have eaten our fill and found our new ways to share the table. And so, while Jesus might be paying attention to us, let's pay attention. Let's watch others. Let's notice. And then, let's watch the world as it changes. Friends, that is our good news for today and for every day. May it be so.